Do the Democrats have any further legal tricks up their sleeves? Joining us now, an expert on this, Thane Rosenbaum, distinguished university professor at Touro College and the author of Saving Free Speech from Itself. Very important topic, saving free speech right now, more important maybe than ever. First, Professor, what is your reaction to the events that have occurred?
Hi, Benny. I'm not surprised. I mean, they anticipated that they did not have the votes. They needed 17 Republicans to defect to the Democratic side, and they never had that. So you always have to ask yourself, what were the Democrats after, since they knew they couldn't win? And they also knew they had jurisdictional problems, right? Because there was still the lingering issue, and some of the senators may have voted to acquit the president precisely because they didn't think that the Senate even had the constitutional authority to bring this action now that the president is a private citizen. They had this very weak case, Benny, that I found shocking, and I spoke about it frequently on NewsMax, which is that they put all their chips on incitement to insurrection. And under American law, Benny, incitement has very specific legal elements to it, and what it requires is words used that cause imminent lawlessness, imminent, not speeches that you made in October, not speeches in November, but the January 6th speech. And Benny, you know, the January 6th speech had this one line that was just unforgettable, where the president said, peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. You know, they should have just repeated that over and over, peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. That is not the language of incitement. And they were stuck because they only pleaded one article of impeachment. And you saw they got their hats handed to them the other day, and even today, because they kept repeating the words dereliction of duty. And if I was the judge, if I was Senator Leahy, Benny, I would have said, what did you just say? Because dereliction of duty is not the legal theory that you pled. You could have, you should have. You were in such a hurry to impeach the president that you didn't want any investigation, no document production, no testimony was taken, and you rushed it and you found one legal theory and it hooked you to the speech. And because of that, none of the other evidence that you sought to present is technically admissible at all. So don't say the words dereliction of duty, because that should have been your second article of impeachment, but you decided to go with just one.
Glad you weren't part of the prosecution. Professor, what comes next for both parties after this acquittal? What comes next for both parties?
Well, there's already, Benny, there's already one case that's commenced sort of in Georgia, where a district attorney in the Atlanta area has already conducted an investigation, taking some witness testimony in connection with the phone call that the president had with the Georgia Secretary of State, in which he was recorded as saying, you need to find me an additional 11,000 or 12,000 votes. And so the question there is a question of fact. What did the president mean? Was he asking the Secretary of State to falsify votes, or was he asking him to correct the votes because he felt that the election was wrongly counted? And so that represents, you know, technically a felony for criminal solicitation and false statements. So that case is there, but that's, again, state law. The Biden administration, the Justice Department, could always, I guess, conduct its own prosecution against the president in connection with January 6th, basically saying that he was an accessory after the fact. So tie him to the 200 people that have committed the violence and say he's an accessory to them after the fact because he didn't call the National Guard. He didn't act in any way, right? You can see that argument evolving. There is also possibly, but you know, that's a question of what does the Biden administration want to get involved again with Donald Trump and now issue subpoenas to senior congressional leaders? I mean, God, they just went through this whole second impeachment. And of course, you know, there's the possibility, Benny, of civil liability. The families, the people that got injured on January 6th, the people that died, you can imagine the possibility, one of them bringing a civil lawsuit, basically saying, the injuries and the death would never have happened had the president not been engaged in all of the speeches that he made. Again, then you're open to the other speeches, right? Then you can go back. But in this instance, they couldn't go back because they only argued one article of impeachment, and they argued incitement, which again made them stick with January 6th, and no other evidence was technically admissible.
That's such a good point. And Professor, expounding on that point, one of the more fruitful, I think, lines of defense was when they used Democrats' own words against them. So they said that Trump said fight, but then here's an entire record of everyone, including the impeachment manager, saying fight. They said Trump used language that was passionate, right, and that elicited violence. But here's all these clip after clip after clip of get out in the street, get up in someone's faces, there should be outrage in the street, like clip after clip. And I think that was such a powerful line of defense for the president's defense. You wrote a book on free speech. If you can't say the word fight when talking about politics, is this a real threat to free speech?
Benny, this is the key point that you're making, and everyone was forgetting this. This was very dangerous territory the Democrats were in. And you're right, I wrote a book about this, and I've written about this for years. Look, political leaders, presidents do not lose their First Amendment rights to political advocacy. And that seems to be what they were saying, that somehow the Bill of Rights don't apply, the free speech rights don't apply to presidents, only the impeachment rights, but not the free speech rights. But the Supreme Court has already said if you're an elected official, you're permitted to engage in political advocacy. And guess what, Benny? As you said, you can be emotional and you can be spontaneous, right? You can actually use dramatic language, right? Emotional language. That's what happens when political leaders give speeches. And you're right, the word fight in a political speech is really innocuous, right? It just doesn't mean anything, right? That's why I said before that the real line was the peaceful and patriotic make your voices heard, because fight, as you pointed out, all of the Democrats, they had footage of them. So again, you're right, this was I thought was very dangerous territory. And let me tell you why. Because historically, the First Amendment has always protected the left. Flag burners, civil rights workers, labor union organizers. The First Amendment was always there to protect them. There was one case, I'm trying to remember the name, Claiborne, I think, Supreme Court case, where the labor organizer, I think, used the word wring their necks, right? Wring their necks. And that was considered political speech. Right? And so just to show you, as a nation, we are much more permissive about our tolerance for speech, much more so than any of the other Western democracies. Until this week. This week, all of a sudden, we became really restrictive on speech, and even the word fight couldn't be used.
Such a common sense, constitutional approach to how we should be conducting politics. Let's hope our political class listens to you, Professor. Let's also hope they take your fashion advice. You have amazing glasses. Those are really something. I mean, you could use more of those. More
you know, Benny, we could trade. We could trade.
Done deal. All right. Thank you so much, Professor Rosenbaum. Thank you for joining us.
Anytime, Benny.
Ahead on the count, story number 4, the CDC, again issuing new guidance, this time about when schools around the country can reopen. The latest in the coronavirus crisis ahead. We'll be right back.